On August 14, 1998, a man named Arthur Hayes made a cup of coffee. It was a Friday. The office was quiet, as it often was on a Friday afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Arthur liked this time of day. The week was ending. The steady hum of the building's air conditioning was the only sound, a familiar white noise that had accompanied his work for 17 years. He worked in records management for a mid-sized insurance firm. His job was to review, process, and file paperwork. It was a job of details, of dates, signatures, and policy numbers. He was good at his job because he was meticulous. He found a strange satisfaction in the order of it all. Each document had its place, each piece of information a specific slot in the grand quiet archive of the company. After taking a slow sip of his coffee, black with no sugar, he returned to his desk. On it sat a small stack of files, the last of the day. The top one was a standard life insurance claim adjustment. A client, a Mr. Evans, had requested a change to his beneficiary designation. The form was filled out correctly, all signatures in place. It was a routine request, one of thousands Arthur had processed over the years. He picked up his stamp, the one with red ink, and pressed it firmly onto the bottom corner of the first page. Processed. He then took a pen and initialed beside the stamp. It was a simple, mechanical action. A muscle memory honed by repetition. But on this day, something made him pause. The date on the request was almost a month old. It had been sitting in an intake basket for longer than usual. This was not a critical error. Sometimes inter-office mail was slow. Sometimes a file was misplaced for a week or two before finding its way to the correct department. It was a minor procedural hiccup, nothing more. Arthur looked at the form again. The new beneficiary was the client's sister. The previous beneficiary had been his wife. According to the notes, the couple had recently divorced. This, too, was common. Life changes and the paperwork follows. He felt a brief, fleeting sense of detachment, a feeling he often had when handling these documents. They were windows into other people's lives, into their marriages, their children, their losses, their plans for the future. He was a silent observer, a custodian of these paper ghosts. He pushed the thought aside. His job was not to interpret the stories, but to process the data. He placed the Evans file into the AL tray, ready for a courier to take it to central filing on Monday morning. He then moved on to the next file and the one after that. By 4:30, his desk was clear. He shut down his computer, tidied his pens, and placed a dust cover over his monitor. The ritual was always the same. It was a signal that the work was done. The day was over. He left the office at 5 o'clock sharp, stepping out into the warm late summer evening, the file and its month-long delay already forgotten. Years passed. Arthur continued his work at the firm. He saw computer systems replace the old paper methods. He adapted. He trained new employees, showing them the digital archives that had replaced the dusty shelves. He was a constant, a quiet fixture in an office that was always changing. He rarely thought about the specific files he had handled in the past. They were a sea of data, a blur of names and numbers. In 2005, 7 years after that Friday afternoon, a junior analyst in the legal department was assigned a task. She was asked to review old, dormant claims, a standard internal audit. She was working her way through the ease when she came across the Evans file. The file was flagged for review because the original claim had never been closed. The policyholder, Mr. Evans, had passed away 3 years prior. The death benefit had been paid out to the listed beneficiary, his sister. The transaction was complete. But a different flag had been triggered by the system's algorithm. It was a temporal anomaly. A small one, but one that the new software was designed to catch. The analyst looked closer. The payout was made in 2002. The beneficiary change request was processed in August of 1998. Everything seemed to be in order. The signature matched. The notarization was valid. The processing stamp was clear. But she kept digging, pulling related digital records. She found the original policy, taken out decades earlier. And then she found something else. A note from a customer service log, dated just 3 days before Arthur Hayes had stamped the form. It was a call from Mr. Evans's ex-wife. She was inquiring about the status of the policy. In the notes, the service representative had confirmed that she was still the listed beneficiary. The call was logged. It was time-stamped. 3 days later, the change request, which had been dated a month prior, was finally processed. This detail mattered more than anyone realized. The analyst noted the discrepancy. A change request arrives but isn't processed for weeks. During that delay, a routine status check confirms the old information. Then, the delayed form is processed, changing the outcome. The internal audit escalated. It was no longer about a single file. It became about the process, about the gaps. How could a document sit unprocessed for a month? Where had it been? In an office of papers, such a thing was unremarkable. A file could fall behind a cabinet. It could be put in the wrong mail bin. It was an acceptable, if inefficient, part of the old system. But what happened later changed how this moment was remembered. Investigators from the firm began a quiet internal review. They looked at other files processed by Arthur's department during that same period. They were looking for a pattern. They found none. It was an isolated incident, an anomaly. They interviewed Arthur. He was nearing retirement by then. He sat in a conference room, much like the ones he had spent his career near, and tried to remember. A file from nearly a decade ago. A Friday afternoon. He couldn't. He had processed thousands of files. They were all the same to him. He remembered his routine. He remembered the quiet of the office. He remembered the satisfaction of a clear desk. But the specific file? The name Evans? It meant nothing to him. The investigators were polite. They showed him a copy of the document. He recognized his own initials, the familiar red stamp. He agreed it was his work. He couldn't explain the delay. He offered theories, interoffice mail, a new courier, a holiday backlog. All were plausible. None were verifiable. The investigation concluded without a definitive finding. It was filed away as a procedural lapse from a bygone era. The kind of thing that wouldn't happen now, with instant digital workflows. The matter was closed. But the story doesn't end there. Because the ex-wife of Mr. Evans, the beneficiary who was removed by that delayed form, eventually learned about the timeline. She learned that for 3 days, she had remained the beneficiary. She learned that a 1-month delay in processing a piece of paper had changed everything. She believed that delay was not an accident. She believed someone, somewhere, had intentionally held that paper back. There was no evidence. No proof. There was only the timeline. A document arrives. It sits, a phone call is made, and then the document is processed. To the insurance firm, it was a clerical error. An unfortunate but explainable flaw in an old system. To Arthur Hayes, it was a forgotten moment on a forgotten Friday, one of thousands of identical moments. An initial on a piece of paper. But to the woman who lost the claim, it was the start of everything. It was the moment that a simple administrative delay became something else. Something she could never prove but would always believe. We look back at our lives, at the small decisions and mundane actions that make up our days. We assume they are harmless. We assume they are insignificant. But what if a single routine action performed without thought was not the end of a process, but the quiet beginning of a story you would never know? What if the most important moment of your life was a moment you never even noticed? Thank you for watching. If this story made you think, please consider subscribing for more reflective content.